Hello there. I'm Kios the Ronin Beatmaker, and welcome to Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And on this episode, we're going to discuss Martin Luther King Jr., the Egyptian Connection. Without further ado, let's get into it. This article is brought to you, or I should say, this essay is brought to you by the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute, titled The Influence of the Mystery Religions on Christianity. Author King Martin Luther King Jr., Crozer Theological Seminary. Date November 29, 1949 to February 15th, 1950. Location Chester, Pennsylvania. Genre Essay. Topics Martin Luther King Jr., Education. Details. King wrote this paper for the course development of Christian ideas taught by Davis. The essay examines how Christianity developed as a distinct religion with a set of central tenets and how it was influenced by those pagan religions and assimilated. King repeats material from an earlier paper, a study of Mithraism, but he extends the discussion here to influence of other mystery religions. Davis gave an A, stating, "This is a very good, and I am glad to have your conclusion. It is not so much that Christianity was influenced by the mystery cults or borrowed from them, but that in a long process of history, this religion developed. Christianity, is the expression of the longing of people for light, truth, salvation, security. That is, with this study, you have made, with the philosophy of both religion and history, underneath all expression, whether words, creeds, cults, ceremonies, is a spiritual order, the ever living search for men for higher life, a fuller life, a more abundant, satisfying life. That is essential. Never stop with the external, which may seem like borrowing, but recognize there is the perennial struggle for truth, fuller life itself. So, through experience, knowledge, as though through other forms, the outer manifestations of religious change, the inner spiritual continues ever. The Greco-Roman word in which the early church developed was one of the diverse religions. The conditions of that era made it possible that these religions to sweep like a tidal wave over the ancient world. The people of that age were eager and zealous in search of for religious experience. The existence of this atmosphere was vitally important in the development and eventual triumph of Christianity. These are the words of Martin Luther King Jr. now. These many religions, known as mystery religions, were not alike in every aspect. To draw this conclusion would lead to a gracious and erroneous superstition. They covered an enormous range and manifested a great diversity in character and outlook, from Orphism to Gnosticism, from the orgies of the Cabria to the fervorous of the Hermetic contemplative. Angus, the mystery religions, and Christianity. However, it is to be noticed that these mysteries possess many fundamental likenesses. All held the initiate's shared, symbolic, sacramental fashion from the experiences of the god. All had sacred rites for the initiated. All offered mystical cleansing from sin. All promised a happy future life for the faithful. Ensslin Christian beginnings. It is not all surprising in view of the wide and growing influence of these religions that when disciples in Antioch and elsewhere preached a crucified and risen Jesus, they should be regarded as heralds of another mystery religion, and that Jesus himself should be taken for the divine Lord of the cult through whose death and resurrection salvation was to be had. That there were striking similarities between the developing church and these religious cannot be denied. Even Christian apologists had to admit that fact. Christianity triumphed over these mystery religions after long conflict. This triumph may be attributed in part to the fact that Christianity took from its opponents its own weapons and used them. The better elements of mystery religions were transformed to the new religion. Quote, as the religious history of the empire is studied more closely, end quote, writes Kumant. Quote, the triumph of the church will, in our opinion, appear more and more as the culmination of a long evolution of beliefs. We cannot understand the Christianity of 5th century with its greatness and weakness, its spiritual exhalation and its puerile superstitions, if we know the moral antecedents of the world in which it developed. End quote. Cumont, Oriental religious and Roman paganism. The victory of Christianity in the Roman Empire is another example of the universal historical law that that culture which conquers in its own turn conquered. The universal law is explicitly true for religion, is especially true for religion. It is the inevitable when a new religion comes to exist side by side with a group of religions, from which it is continually detaching members, introducing them into its own midst with the practices of their original religions, impressed upon their minds, that this new religion should tend to assimilate with the assimilation of their members, some of them elements of these existing religions. Quote, the more crusading a religion is, the more it absorbs. End quote. Certainly, Christianity has been crusading religion from the beginning. It is because of this crusading spirit and its superb power of adaptability that Christianity has been able to survive. It is at this point that we are able to see why knowledge of the mystery religions is important for many serious study of the history of Christianity. It is at this point that we are able to see why knowledge of the mystery religions is important for any serious study of the history of Christianity. It is well nigh impossible to grasp Christianity through and through without knowledge of these cults. It may be remembered, as implied above, that Christianity was not a sudden and miraculous transformation, springing forth full grown as Athena sprang from the head of Zeus, but it is as a composite of a slow and laborious growth. Therefore, it is necessary to study the historical and social factors that contributed to the growth of Christianity. In speaking of this indispensability of knowledge of these cults as requisite of the serious study of Christianity, Dr. Angus says, quote, as an important background to early Christianity and as a chief medium of syncretism to the West, they cannot be neglected, for to fail to recognize the moral and spiritual values as holistic Oriental paganism is to misunderstand the early Christian centuries and to do injustice to the victory of Christianity. Moreover, much of the mysteries has persisted in various modern phases and thought and practices. End quote. Angus, The Mystery Religions and Christianity. This is not to say that early Christians sat down and copied these views verbatim, but after being in contact with these surrounding religions and hearing certain doctrines expressed, it was only natural for some of these views to become part of the subconscious mind. When they sat down to write what they were expressing consciously, which they had dwelled in their subconscious minds. It is also significant to know that Roman tolerance had favored this great synchronism of religious ideas. Borrowing was not only natural, but inevitable. The present The present study represents an attempt to provide a survey of the influence of the mystery religions on Christianity. In order to give a comprehensive picture of this subject, I will discuss five of the most popular of these religions separately, rather than to view them en masse as a single great religious system. The latter method is to adapt to neglect the distinctive contribution of each cult to the religious life of the age, and the same time to attribute to a given cult phases of some other system. However, in conclusion, I will attempt to give these fundamental aspects characteristics of all the cults that greatly influence Christianity. The influence of the cult of Cybele and Addis. The first Oriental religion to invade the West was the cult of the Great Mother of the Gods. The divine persona of in whom this cult entered was the Magna Mater Duum, who was conceived as the source of all life as well as a personification of all powerful of nature, all powers of nature. Willingbo, pagan regeneration. She was the great mother not only of all the gods, but of all the men as well. The winds, the sea, the earth, and the snowy seat of Olympus are hers. And when from her mountains she ascends into the great heavens, the son of Cronus himself gives way before her. In like manner do also the other immortal bless, honor, and dread goddess. Quoted by Willoughby's Pagan Regeneration. At an earlier date, there was associated with Cybele, the Great Mother, a hero divinity called Attic, who personified the life of vegetable world particularly. Around these two divinities, there grew up a confused tangle of myths. In an explanation of their cult rites, various writers gave different versions of Cybele Addis myth. However, these specific differences need not concern us, for the most significant aspects are common in all the various versions. We are all concerned at this point with showing how this religion influenced the thought of early Christians. Addis was the good shepherd, the son of Cybele, the great mother who gave birth to him without union with mortal man, as the story of the Virgin Mary. According to the myth, Addis died, either slain by another or by his own hand. At the death of Addis, Cybele mourned vehemently until he arose to life again in the springtime. The central theme of the myth was the triumph of Addis over death, and the participant in the rites of the cult undoubtedly believed that his attachment to the victorious deity would ensure in a similar triumph in his life. It is evident that in Rome there was a festival celebrating the death and resurrection of Addis. This celebration was held annually from March 22nd to the 25th. Fraser, Adonius, Addis, Osiris, page 166. The influence of this religion on Christianity is shown by the fact in Phrygia, Gaul, Italy, and other countries where Attis worship was powerful. The Christians adapted the actual date, March 25th, as the anniversary of our Lord's Passion. Abid, page 199. Again, we may notice that at this time, Attis festival on March 22nd, an effigy of the god was fastened to the trunk of a pine tree, Attis thus being a slain and hanged on a tree. This effigy was later buried in a tomb on March 25th, known as the Day of Blood. The high priest, impersonating Attic, drew blood from him unarmed and offered it up in a place of blood of human sacrifice, thus, as it were, sacrificing himself. It is this fact that immediately brings to mind the words in the epistle to the Hebrews, quote, "But Christ, being come on high priest, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, obtained eternal redemption for us." Heb 9:11. Now, to get back to the festival. The night the priest went back to the tomb and found it empty, the god had risen on the third day from the dead. And on the 25th, the resurrection was celebrated with great rejoicing. During the great celebration, and sacramental meal of some kind was taken, initiates were baptized with blood. Hereby their sins were slashed away, and they were signed to born again. Weigel, The Paganism in Our Christianity, pages 116 to 117. There can hardly be any doubt of the fact that these ceremonies and beliefs strongly colored the interpretation placed by the first Christians upon the life and death of historic Jesus. Moreover, the merging of the worship of Attis into that of Jesus was effected without interruption, for these pagan ceremonies were enacted in a sanctuary on the Vatican Hill, which was afterwards taken over by the Christians. By the Mother Church of St. Peter now stands upon the very spot. Ebed, page 117. The influence of Adonius. The influence of Adonis. Another popular religion influenced the thought of early Christians was the worship of Adonis. As is commonly known, Antioch was one of the earliest seats of Christianity. It was in this city that there was celebrated each year the death of resurrection of the god Adonis. The faith had always exerted an influence on Jewish thought, so much that the prophet Ezekiel 8:14, found it necessary to scold the women of Jerusalem for weeping for the dead Tammuz, Adonis, at the very gate of the temple. When we come to Christian thought, the influence seems ever greater. For even the place of Bethlehem, selected by the early Christians as the scene of the birth of Jesus, was none other than an early shrine of this pagan god, a fact that led many to confuse Adonis with Jesus Christ. Weigel, Op Site, page 110. It was believed that this god suffered a cruel death, which he descended into hell, rose again, and then ascended into heaven. Each following year, there was a great festival in commemoration of his resurrection, and the very words, "The Lord is risen," were probably used. The festival ended in the celebration of his ascension in the sight of his worshippers. Needless to say, this story of the death of resurrection of Adonis is quite similar to the Christian story of the death of resurrection of Christ. This coincidence had led many critics to suppose that the story of the burial and resurrection of Jesus is simply a myth borrowed from this pagan religion. Whether these critics are right in their interpretation still remains a moot question. However, we can come to the idea of Jesus' descent into hell. It seems that we have a direct borrow from the Andonist religion, and in fact from other religious religions also. Both the Apostles' Creed and Anthesian say that between the Friday night and Sunday morning, Jesus was in Hades. Now, this idea has no scriptural foundation except in those difficult passages in the first epistle of Peter, Peter 3:13 to 4:6, which many scholars have designated as the most ambiguous passage of the New Testament. In fact, the idea did not appear in the church of tenet of Christianity until late in the 4th century. Weigel, Opsite, page 113. Such facts led almost inevitably to the view that this idea had a pagan origin, since it appears not only in the legend of Adonis, but also in those of Heracles, Dionysus, Orpheus, Osiris, Hermes, Balder, and other deities. Abid, page 114. The influence of Osiris and Isis. The Egyptian mysteries of Isis and Osiris exerted considerable influence upon early Christianity. The Egyptian mysteries of Isis and Osiris exerted a considerable influence upon early Christianity. These two great Egyptian deities, whose worship passed into Europe, were revered not only in Rome, but in many other centers where Christian communities were growing up. Osiris and Isis, so the legend runs, were at once the same time brother and sister, husband and wife. But Osiris was murdered, his coffined body being thrown into the Nile, and shortly afterwards, the widowed and exiled Isis gave birth to a son, Horus. Meanwhile, the coffin was washed up in the Syrian coast and became miraculously lodged in the trunk of a tree. This tree afterwards chanced to be cut down and made into a pillar in the palace of Byblos, and there Isis at length found it. After recovering Osiris's dismembered body, Isis restored him to life and installed him as a king in the netherworld. Meanwhile, Horus, having grown to manhood, reigned on earth, later becoming the third person of this great Egyptian trinity. Weigel, op site page 119. In the records of both Herodotus and Plutarch, we find that there are festivals held each year in Egypt celebrating the resurrection of Osiris. While Herodotus failed to give a date for this festival, Plutarch says that it lasted 4 days, giving the date as the 17th day of the Egyptian month Hathor, which according to the Alexandrian calendar used by him corresponded to November 13th. Fraser, op site page 257. Other Egyptian records speak of another feast in honor of all the dead, when such lamps were lit, which was held about November 8th. Abid, page 258. It is interesting to know that the Christian Feast of All Souls in honor of the dead likewise falls at the beginning of November, and in many countries lamps and candles are burned all night on that occasion. There seems little doubt that this custom was identical with Egyptian festival. The Festival of All Saints, which is held 1 day before that of All Souls, is also probably identical with it in origin. Weigel, off-site page 121. This still stands as a festival in the Christian calendar, and thus Christians unconsciously perpetuate the worship of Osiris in modern times. Thus, Christians unconsciously perpetuate the worship of Osiris in modern times. However, this is not only the point at which religion of Osiris and Isis exerted influence over Christianity. There can hardly be any doubt that the myths of Isis had a direct bearing on the elevation of Mary, the mother of Jesus. to the lofty position that she holds in Roman Catholic theology. As a commonly known, Isis had two capacities, which her worshippers warmly commended her for. Firstly, she was pictured as the Lady of Sorrows, weeping for the dead Osiris, and secondly, she was commended as the Divine Mother, nursing her infant son, Horus. In the former capacity, she was identified with the great mother goddess Demeter, whose mourning for Persephone was the main feature in the Eleusinian mysteries. In the latter capacity, Isis was represented in tens of thousands of statues and paintings, holding the divine child in her arms. Now, when Christianity triumphed, we find that these same paintings and figures become those of the Madonna and child with little or no difference. Abid, page 123. In fact, archaeologists are often left in confusion in attempting to distinguish the one from the other. It is also interesting to know that in the second century, a story began to spread stating that Mary had been miraculously carried to heaven by Jesus and his angels. The spreading of this story has been attributed to Meleto, bishop of Sardis. In the 6th century, a festival came to be celebrated around this event, known as the Festival of Assumption. It is now one of the greatest feasts of Roman Catholicism. It is celebrated annually on August 13th, but it was the very date that the festival of Diana and Artemis was celebrated, with whom Isis was identified. Here we see how Mary gradually came to take place of the goddess. Weigel, Opsite, page 125. The influence of the greater mysteries of Ad Elysius. In the century of the Christian era, the Elysian mystery cult was more favorable known than any of the cults of Greece. Its fame and popularity was largely due to the connection of Elysius with Athens. The origin of this cult is obscure and uncertain. Some writers trace its origin to Egypt, while others upheld Elysius in Greece as a place of its birth. In order to understand the type of religious experience represented in this important cult, we must turn to the myth of the grape of Demeter's daughter by Plato. We must turn to the myth of the grape of Demeter's daughter by Plato. It is stated with sufficient elaboration that the harmonic hymn to Demeter. In this myth, Persephone is depicted by playing in the meadows of Messiah in Asia with the daughters of Oceanus and Typhus. While playing, she was stolen by Plato and carried off to the underworld by his bride. The mother, frenzied with grief, rushed about the earth for 9 days in search of her lost daughter. As a result of her wandering, she came to Elysius, where she was seen, although not recognized, by four daughters of Caecius, sitting near a public well called the Fountain of Maidenhood. After telling the fictitious tale of her escape from pirates, she won the sympathy of the girls who took her home, and at her own request was given a job to nurse their infant brother, Dephon, Demophon. After making herself known, she commanded the people of Elysius to build her a temple. In connection with the temple, she established certain ceremonies and rites for her worship. During her short stay at the temple of Elysius, the whole earth grew barren. Men began to die for the lack of food, while the sacrifices to the gods decreased in number because the animals were dying out. The other gods pleaded with her to relent, but she refused to do so until Persephone was restored to her. Pluto, also called Hades, therefore, at the request of Zeus, released her, but not before he had caused her to eat a pomegranate seed, which miraculously required her return after a period of time. Demeter, in her joy at the restoration of her lost daughter, allowed the crops to grow once more and institute in honor of the event the Elysian mysteries, which gave to the mortals the assurance of a happy future life. The significance of this story is immediately clear. It was a nature myth portraying a vivid and realistic picture of the action of life in a vegetable world in regards to the changing seasons. Every year, nature passes through a cycle of apparent death and resurrection. In winter, all plants die. This represents the period of Dimitri's grief over her daughter. Spring, the time when all plants come back to life, indicates the return of plenty when the goddess maintains all life until autumn, when her daughter returns to Hades and the earth becomes once more desolate. Willoughby, op. Cite, page 42. The myth is also an example of poignant human experience, reflecting the joys, sorrows, and hopes of mankind in the face of death. The mysteries of human life and death are vividly enacted by Demeter, Persephone, and Hades. Hades, the god of death, stole the beloved daughter, Persephone, from Demetri, the life giver who refused to admit defeat until she secured her daughter's resurrection. In this legend, human beings who are always loved and lost are depicted as never or seldom losing hope for reunion with their God. These fundamental human experiences and the life of nature. These fundamental human experiences and the life of nature are the main substances of the Elysium mysteries. To the searchers of salvation, the Elysium cult offered not only the promise of a happy future, but also a definite assurance of it. Nilsson, Greek Popular Religion, page 54. Now we have observed the modern Greek Easter festival. It seems certain that it preserves the spirit, if not the form, of the old Elysian worship. In the spring, those who had shared Dimitri's grief for the loss of her daughter welcomed the return of Persephone with the joy that the returning life of vegetation might kindle. And today, similar experiences are represented by Greek Christians. After mourning over the dead Christ, represented most conspicuously by a wax image carried through the streets, there comes an announcement by the priest on the midnight before Easter Sunday that the Christ is risen. At this moment, the light from the candle of the priest is passed on to the light of the candles of his companions. Guns and firecrackers are discharged as they prepare to break the Latin feast. Fairbanks, Greek Religion, page 228. As in Elysian Mysteries, the modern Greek Christians find this as a moment of supreme joy. So we might say that Elysianism was not bolted out of Christianity. On the contrary, many of its forms and some of its old content have been perpetuated in Christianity. The influence of Mithraism. Mithraism is perhaps the greatest example of paganism's last effort to reconcile itself to the great spiritual movement which was gaining such sturdy influence with its purer conception of God. Dill, Roman, Society from Nero to Marcus Aurelius, page 585. Ernest Renan, the French philosopher and Orientalist, expressed the opinion that Mithraism would have been the religion of modern world if anything had occurred to halt or destroy the growth of Christianity in the early centuries of its existence. All this goes to show how important Mithraism was in ancient times. It was suppressed by the Christians sometime in the later part of the 4th century AD, but its collapse seems to have been due to the fact that by that time many of its doctrines and practices had been adopted by the church, so that it was practically absorbed by its rival. Originally, Mithra was one of the lesser gods of the ancient Persian pantheon. But at the time of Christ, he had come to a co equal with Ahura Mazda, the Supreme Being. He possessed many attributes, the most important being his office of defender of truth and all good things. In the Avesta, this is the sacred book of the religion of Iran, Mithra is represented as the genius of celestial light. He emerges from the rocky summit of eastern mountains at dawn and goes through heaven with a team of four white horses. When the night falls and he still illumines the surface of the earth, ever walking, ever watchful. He is not sun or moon or any star, but a spirit of light, ever wakeful, watching with 100 eyes. He hears all and sees all. None can deceive him. Komot, Mysteries of Mithra, page 2 to 3. Taurus, the home of St. Paul, was one of the great centers of worship, and there is a decided tinge of Mithraism in the Epistles and Gospels. Such designations of our Lord as a day spring from high on, the light of the sun righteousness, and similar expressions seem to come directly from Mithric influence. Weigel, Opsite, page 122, 129. Again, it has that Mithra was born from a rock, the god out of the rock. It must also be noticed that this worship was also conducted in a cave. Now it seems that general belief of the earthly church that Jesus was born in a cave grows directly out of Mithric ideas. The words of St. Paul, quote, they drank of that spiritual rock, and that rock was Christ, end quote, also seems to be a direct borrow from the Mithric scriptures. The Hebrew Sabbath having been abolished by Christians, the church made a sacred day of Sunday, partly because it was a day of resurrection. But when we observe a little further, we find as a solar festival, Sunday was the sacred day of Mithra. It is also interesting to notice that since Mithra was addressed as Lord, Sunday must have been the Lord's day, long before Christian use. Ibid, page 137. It is also to be noticed that our Christmas, December 25th, was the birthday of Mithra and was only taken over in the 4th century as the date, actually unknown, of the birth of Jesus. To make the picture a little more clear, we may list a few of the similarities between these two religions. 1. Both regard Sunday as a holy day. 2. December came to be considered as the anniversary of the birth of Mithra and Christ. Also, no, 3. That was 2. This is 3. Baptism and communion meal were important parts of the ritual of both groups. 4. The rebirth of converts was a fundamental idea in the two cults. 5. The struggle with evil and eventual triumph of good were essential ideas in both religions. In summary, we may say that the belief of immortality, a mediator between God and man, the observance of certain sacramental rites, the rebirth of converts, and in most cases, the support of high ethical ideals were common to Mithraism as well as Christianity. In fact, the comparison becomes so evident that many believed the Christian movement itself became a mystery cult. In fact, the comparison became so evident that many believed the Christian movement itself became a mystery cult. Quote, Jesus was divine Lord. He too had found the road to heaven by his suffering and resurrection. He too had God for his Father. He had left behind the secret whereby men could achieve the goal with him. End quote. Ensel op. Cite, page 190. Although the above paragraph makes it obvious that there are many similarities between these two religions, we must guard against the fallacy of seeing all similarity as direct borrowing. For instance, The sacraments of baptism and the Eucharist have been mentioned as rites. The Eucharist has been mentioned as rites, which were practiced by both Christians and pagans. It is improbable, however, that either of these were introduced into Christian practices by association with the mystery cults. The baptism ceremony in both cases, Christian and pagan, was supposed to have an effect of identifying the initiate with his Savior. But although baptism did not originate with the Christians, still it was not copied from the pagans. It seems instead to have been carried over from Jewish background and modified by the new ideas and beliefs of the Christians. Eucharist are likewise, through similar in some respects to the communion meal of Mithraism, was not a rite borrowed from them. There are several explanations regarding the beginning of the observation of the Lord's Supper. Some held the sacrament was instituted by Jesus himself. Others saw it as an outright growth from Jewish precepts. Still, others felt that after the death of Jesus, the disciples saw in their common meal an opportunity to hold a kind of memorial service for him. On the whole, early Christians were not greatly concerned about the likenesses between the Mithrak cult and their own. They felt at first that these competitors were not worthy of consideration, and few references to them are found in Christian literature. When Mithricism became widespread and powerful, it attached so much attention to that certain Christian apologists felt the need to present an explanation for their similarities in their respective characteristics. The only one they could offer was quite naive, but it was keeping in with the trends of the thought in that age. They maintained that it was a work of the devil who helped to confuse men by creating a pagan imitation of the true religion. Conclusion: there can hardly be any gainsaying of the fact that Christianity was greatly influenced by the mystery religions, both from a ritual and doctrinal angle. There can hardly be any gainsaying of the fact that Christianity was greatly influenced by the mystery religions from both a ritual and doctrinal angle. This does not mean that there was deliberate copying on the part of Christianity. On the contrary, it was generally a natural and unconscious process, rather than a deliberate plan of action. Christianity was subject to the same influences from the environment as were the other cults, and it was sometimes produced the same reaction. The people were conditioned by the contact with the older religions and the background and general trend of the time. Dr. Shirley Jackson Case has written some words that are quite adept at this point. He says, quote, following the lead of the Apostle John, the Christian missionaries on Gentile soil finally made of Christianity a more appealing religion than any of the other mystery cults. This was accomplished not by any slavish process of imitation, but by a serious attempt to meet the better specific religious needs that the mysteries had awakened and nourished, and by phasing religious assurance more convincingly in a similar terminology. Case, end quote. Case, The Mystery Religions, The Encyclopedia of Religion, edited by Vergus Firm, page 511 to 513. The greatest influence of the mystery religions on Christianity lies in a different direction from that of doctrine and ritual. It lies in the fact that mystery religions paved the way for the preservation of Christianity to the world of that time. They prepared the people mentally and emotionally to understand the type of religion which Christianity represented. They were themselves, in varying degrees, imperfect examples of the Galilean cult, which was to replace them. They encouraged a movement away from the state religions and philosophical systems and toward the desire for personal salvation and promise of immortality. Christianity was truly indebted to the mystery religions for this contribution, for they had done this part of the groundwork and thus opened the way for Christian missionary work. Many views, while passing out the paganism into Christianity, were given a more profound and spiritual meaning by Christians. Yet we must be indebted to the source. To discuss Christianity without mentioning other religions would be like discussing the greatness of the Atlantic Ocean without the slightest mention of all the many tributaries that keep it flowing. To discuss Christianity without mentioning other religions would be like discussing the greatness of the Atlantic Ocean without the slightest mention of the many tributaries that keep it flowing. Christianity, however, survived because it appeared to be the result of a trend in the social order or in the historical cycle of the human race. Forces have been known to delay trends. Forces have been known to delay trends, but very few have stopped them. The staggering question that arises is what will be the next stage of man's religious progress? Is Christianity the crowning achievement in the development of religious thought, or will there be another religion more advanced? And that concludes Martin Luther King Jr. and the Egyptian connection. So, in this series that I have been doing regarding Christianity and yeah, and regarding Christianity, I wanted to point out, and I kept on stressing the fact that religion, and this, and I should say Christianity in and of itself, was inspired by older religions, and that is just a fact. In fact, I'll take it a step further and let you guys know that in reality, Christianity was inspired by Africans. So, shout out to my white brothers and sisters of the Christian faith. You're practicing an African religion of pagan organism, of pagan uh, origin. And so, the reason why I wanted to discuss this is because I think it's important for all of us to be very self aware of the reality of our situation, especially when it comes to the practices of our faith. And, I have been listening to lectures from Shaka Atmos, from the professor from the Lady Babylon channel, which I have quoted several times in my recent videos regarding Christianity. And, I have been receiving some pushback in some of my videos, which I wanted to address here currently. And I wanted to address one in particular, and I brought it up for y'all to see so we can go along on this together. And here it's from James Woodard, and it's from my video on Moses and the Egyptian connection. And he says, quote, I got less than 5 minutes in. You can't pronounce any terms correctly, including key names such as the very well known, as well as the very well known Hasheput, Hatshepsut. It's not hard. Uh, 1 Kings 6v1s is 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. Please learn how to cite the Bible if you are going to talk about anything in broad scope of ancient Near Eastern history texts or religion. You are reading painfully slowly and making constant errors. And even though you are just reading from what someone else wrote, There is a core skill of being a YouTube presenter. Please work on it. I will go and find this article myself and save a good 10 minutes. So I wanted to respond to James Woodard, and I wanted to thank him for his constructive criticism and also remind him that if he took some time and actually listened through my video, he would know that I apologize for my pronunciation. I guess, for someone like myself who doesn't spend most of his time pronouncing and reading Egyptian names, forgive me if I cannot pronounce them all. And I also will admit that, yeah, I'm still learning. And I appreciate the fact that you did take time. But I would also like to remind him, Mr. James, that everything that I was saying has just been confirmed. Everything in the article has just been confirmed. So you can criticize me for taking my time to read and pronounce everything, and guess what? I like to take my time. And when it comes to this type of information, it's a lot to digest for many of us out there. And as I've always said in my videos, these are all light introductions. And I always implore everyone to do their own research, Mr. James. Just like it seems like I motivated you to do your own research and to read the article yourself. So I'm glad that I was able to aid in furthering your capabilities of furthering your research skills. But I also want to explain to you that I like to take my time when I read. And it's deservable for some of the content that we are discussing. As yeah, sometimes there are going to be some big words. And yeah, I might stumble and trip over them. But I follow through, and I apologize and I acknowledge that. But the needless to say, my friend James, I hope that you have taken some time to listen through to this entire presentation. I think I did a pretty good job this time around. And I hope that you were able to realize that everything that I was saying in reference to that article, MLK has said. Now, you can continue to believe in Christianity. I don't have any problems with that. I myself am a Buddhist. But I would implore you to realize that what you're believing in and what you're practicing is just another inspiration from a much older time. So I don't know what to tell you, my friend James. Uh, I'm just human, doing the best that I can. But I appreciate your commentary and I appreciate constructive criticism. But I'm going to continue to keep speaking nice and slowly and do the best to keep it nice and flowing and apologize when I mispronounce things. And for everyone else out there, like I said, do your own research. This was just a light introduction, but just something to remind everyone out there that with any religious faith that you practice, mine included, it's best to understand the origins so you can better understand how to navigate the corruption that has now been seen throughout Christianity. You can get frustrated at me for my words, but the reality is there. And you can look into the origins of it too. There are some questionable things in Christianity that we have to take into consideration. And all of this here is just trying to point to is that as many of us like to pride ourselves and say that Christianity is something that was founded within some guise of European ideology, it was our Africans, brothers and sisters, who created it. I know some people tend to forget that Egypt is in Africa and it's not in the Middle East. There is historical evidence to explain why North Africa has now been conquered by the Arabs. And that actually dates back to the carriers and a certain Egyptian pharaoh hiring um, Arab mercenaries to replace the royal guard to replace the royal guard of Egypt. Now, you can go and watch Shaka Atmos's lectures on this, and you can get that information for yourself. But the point that I'm making here for everyone to understand is that the point that I'm trying to make here is that with all modern day religions, their origins are far more older than we know. And here we now know where the origins of Mother Mary comes from Isis, and Christ from Osiris. Uh, you don't. It's funny to me how they want us to he's over here telling me to like quote the verses from the Bible correctly. Well, my brother, the most of the verses of the Bible can be traced back to paganism. So I don't know what to tell you, my brother James. How do you translate that? I don't have anything against religion or anything. But my whole point here is that when it comes to modern day religion, we have to understand that they purposely go out of their way to suppress the origins of the truth of their religion. And Martin Luther King Jr. has said it here as well that they were doing that purposely. And he says unconsciously, but I would argue back when you look at the Council of Nicaea and what they were doing in terms of the various gospels that they were out there, burning and destroying some, picking and choosing those that fit the narrative. That's for you to decide. I'm not here to tell you how to feel about the Council of Nicaea, the great schism within the Eastern and Western Christianity. One that focuses more on the fundamentalism, one that focuses more on the libertarian. I'm not here to argue any of that stuff. I'm not a theologian in any regards. I'm just learning, and I'm trying to be better at it. But my point here is to everyone out there is don't shoot the messenger. Now, if there's anything else that I can help you with in terms of improving my quality, please, Mr. James, let me know. But don't get frustrated at me, my dude. I'm just over here just repeating this stuff. And you want me to cite the Bible, my dude? Everything that I was reading to you that you had a problem with me struggling and pronouncing certain words and names were cited in the references below. Every article that I pick up and read, all the references are down below. I don't choose and read things that are just going to be talking out my ass. And so I wanted to conclude this with kind of giving you an understanding that like I'm not being some idiot here. And I apologize that I'm not good at pronouncing names, but like, hey man, some of these names are really hard to pronounce. I'm doing my best. Cut a brother some slack. Come on now. I mean, dude, if you can pronounce some of these names 3 times fast, man, hey man, I'll give you a cookie just for the showmanship. But I just wanted to point that out and appreciate the constructive criticism. But you're getting on my case about citing the Bible, my dude. We just cited the Bible, and guess what? The Bible was cited from early Egyptian pagan practices and cults. Even they themselves were under the impression that Christianity is a cult. Martin Luther King just said it here. It's already cited that Christianity is part of the mystery cults. So for anyone out there, my brothers and sisters of the Christian faith, don't get mad at me. I'm not sure if our friend James Wood here will make it to the 59 and 25th second mark of this video, but I highly recommend he go over there and read this essay from MLK himself. I mean, every religion in this world, modern day religion, is inspired from something much older, and most of it may come out of Africa. Sorry, for my white brothers and sisters out there, might come as a surprise to you, but Christianity is actually an African idea. So you can go and cite the Bible. Just know that it was a brother that gave you that inspiration. You know, it's just funny to me, man. It's just funny to me. We one of the oldest Egyptian boats is found in Ireland. No one wants to talk about the origins of the Irish and how they can trace it back to Egypt with Princess Senu, Queen Senu. You know, but we can go and cover that. I already covered that. You can go and check out my episode on that. All right, we can talk about the origins of the Irish and how they come from the Christian from Africa, but don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me about the Egyptian artifacts that were found in North America, and the fact that when Solon went to go and hang out with the Egyptian priests, they were telling him they used to hang out and go over to Africa. I mean, to North America. They used to island hop their way to North America. So everything in the Bible, the entire concept of the Bible and Christianity came out of Africa. I'll say it again for those in the back. The entire idea and philosophy of Christianity came from Africa, out of Egypt, which is in Africa. So you can cite the Bible all you want, but it's a cult. It's a mystery cult. It took inspiration from various mystery cults, as we just covered. Mary is Isis. Osiris is Christ. We're gonna pretend here and act as if none of these mystery religions predated Christianity? Really? We're not gonna act like that. We're not gonna pretend that the Mayans and the Incas, they already knew, they knew about other civilizations. They knew about the story of creation, the Great Flood. Are we going to pretend that the Great Flood is a Christian idea when it's already an idea in Hinduism? Manu, that's his name. Noah in the Hinduism is Manu. That's his name. Okay, so you can cite Christianity all you want, and you can pretend that it's the purveyor of everything. But guess what? It was inspired by every other religion that predated it, as Martin Luther King so eloquently explained in his essay, which I hope James takes his time and goes and reads if he doesn't want to hear my lovely voice. So, this is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, all of these religions. Okay, well, let's take it a step further. Okay, we're gonna say that the Egyptians built the pyramids. Come on now, please. One of the oldest pyramids in the world is located in Indonesia. The oldest gold coin found in that pyramid in Indonesia was the gold was traced back to Turkey. How the hell did a piece of gold from Turkey make its way all the way to a pyramid in Indonesia? So don't tell me that the Egyptians built the pyramids. That's a load of bullshit. Okay. Don't tell me that the Christians came up with Christianity and Christ and all that. That's not true. We just covered that. You can go ahead and cite the Bible, but you better go and cite the origins of the Bible. And that came right out of Egypt, Africa. So I will be covering more aspects of Christianity at a later date, but I just wanted to wrap up my whole story about Christianity because I knew after I did my first two parters on the myths behind Christ, I knew that I was going to be getting some pushback and some choice words and some constructive criticism, which actually I appreciate. I honestly do appreciate what James has had to say. I definitely will continue to get better and better. So I hope he does come by again for the channel. But I'm just here to tell you guys, as we wrap up this story of Christianity, all right, and as we also know in covering Moses in the Hebrew Bible and in the Hebrew Bible and Judaism, um, not all is what it seems. So I hope that when James went and read the Moses article, he came to the understanding that Moses was not a Jew. He was an Egyptian. Christ was an Egyptian. Mother Mary was an Egyptian. Christianity is just the inspiration of the mystery cults. It's just, that's what it is. You can get mad at me all you want and criticize me all you want, the way I talk, how I talk too slow, how I can't pronounce words, all that fun jazz. You can go ahead and criticize me for all that. That's fine. But don't get mad at me for the reality of your situation, that you choose to live in the false reality and not in the essential reality. I mean, you can go ahead and cite the Bible, but I don't think you're taking the extra step that I have just taken for you. Did you a favor, James? And for everyone else out there who's been a little apprehensive about wanting to take that step and kind of questioning their belief system. And that's all I ever do here. It's my own one of my own goals in life is to continue to challenge my own foundational belief system by learning and taking light introduction to these things. You would be shocked and confused and maybe a little horrified by my book list that I have on Amazon. All the books that I have and all the current books that I have. I'm adding to a library so that way I can sit down and do my own research and compile my own notes. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing this. Is for my own benefit and for anyone else out there. There's a lot of overwhelming stuff. Not everyone has time or the interest to go and look into the Bible and do all of these things. It's overwhelming at times. And I enjoy doing it. And hell, man, it helps with my reading comprehension. So, there's a plus to everything. And like I said, I take the constructive, the criticism well. I appreciate it. I'm gonna keep on taking my time speaking my words. If you have such an issue with that, you can speed up YouTube. There are people out there that read that listen to podcasts 3 times X speed or whatever. Speed it up then, bro. Don't get mad at me because I like to take my time with my words. This is a lot of stuff to digest, and I want everyone out there to be able to take that time to digest my words and the information. That's all I'm doing, bro. But I really do appreciate the constructive criticism, though. I really do. I hope you made it this far. uh, we live in such a fascinating world. And I just hope that everyone out there, you take a little bit from it and make it you. My aim here is to just challenge your foundational belief system and to help you becoming the best version of yourself by being better than yesterday. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. If you made it this far, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.